The 1920s. Flappers danced. Jazz music soared. It was a time of change and excitement. But beneath the surface, a darker story brewed. Prohibition, the ban on alcohol, had taken hold. What seemed like a good idea backfired. See, instead of stopping people from drinking, Prohibition fueled a different beast: organized crime. Gangs sprung up, making and selling illegal booze. They were ruthless and powerful. They bribed cops, threatened witnesses, and eliminated rivals. This wasn't just about booze, though. It was about power, money, and control. The thirst for it turned American cities into battlegrounds. And nowhere was this more evident than in Chicago. Chicago in the 1920s was a city of stark contrasts. Wealthy socialites rubbed shoulders with hardened criminals. Opulent mansions cast long shadows over impoverished neighborhoods. And amidst this urban tapestry, a deadly game of power played out. Two major gangs vied for control of Chicago's lucrative underworld: Al Capone's Chicago outfit and the North Side gang, led by Bugs Moran. They ran gambling dens, speakeasies, and smuggling rings, accumulating vast wealth and influence. Their rivalry was fierce and bloody. Shootouts were commonplace, leaving a trail of bodies and fear in their wake. Each side craved absolute control of the city's underworld, and that meant eliminating the competition. Al Capone was a name whispered in fear and awe. Born in Brooklyn, he rose through the ranks to become the boss of the Chicago outfit. He was ruthless, cunning, and ambitious, with a sharp mind for business and a trigger-happy streak. Capone cultivated a public image of a benevolent benefactor, even as his empire was built on blood and violence. He donated to charities, rubbed elbows with politicians, and charmed the media. But beneath the expensive suits and the charming demeanor lurked a cold-blooded killer. Capone was linked to countless murders, though he was never convicted of any. He ruled his empire with an iron fist, demanding absolute loyalty and brooking no dissent. George Bugs Moran was cut from a different cloth. A hardened criminal from his youth, he was known for his brutality and unpredictability. He hated Capone with a passion, seeing him as a flashy upstart encroaching on his territory. Unlike Capone, Moran shunned the limelight. He was a hands-on leader, often involved in his gang's criminal activities. He was cunning and ruthless, but some considered him reckless and impulsive. Moran's gang controlled much of Chicago's North Side. It was a constant thorn in Capone's side. Their ongoing battles, fueled by revenge and greed, kept the city on edge. A final showdown seemed inevitable. Section 5. The brewing storm, tensions escalate. The tension in Chicago was palpable. It was like a pot simmering on a stove, ready to boil over. Capone and Moran's gangs engaged in a deadly dance, each incident ratcheting up the stakes. Capone, determined to consolidate his power, grew increasingly impatient with Moran's defiance. Whispers of a plan circulated within the outfit. A plan to eliminate Moran and his lieutenants. Meanwhile, Moran remained defiant. He believed he could outmaneuver Capone. He continued to operate his illicit businesses, daring Capone to make a move. But he had underestimated Capone's ruthlessness and the lengths he would go to maintain his grip on power. Section 6. The Bloody Valentine, a Day of Infamy. February 14th, 1929. Valentine's Day, a day for love and romance. But in Chicago, it would be forever etched in history for a different reason. A massacre that shocked the nation. That morning, 4 men dressed as police officers entered a garage on Chicago's North Side. They lined up 7 men against the wall. Then, in a hail of gunfire, they unleashed their deadly payload. The victims were members of Moran's gang, but Moran himself wasn't among them. He had overslept and missed the meeting. The massacre was a calculated act of brutality, a message from Capone. Section 7. Inside the garage, piecing together the crime. The aftermath of the massacre was gruesome. Bodies riddled with bullets lay sprawled on the blood-soaked floor. The brutality of the crime sent shockwaves through the city and beyond. Investigators arrived to a scene of carnage. Shell casings littered the floor. The air reeked of gunpowder and blood. It was a meticulous execution, carried out with chilling precision. Despite the public outcry and intense pressure to bring the perpetrators to justice, the case proved frustratingly elusive. Witnesses were too terrified to talk. Evidence was scarce. The killers had vanished into thin air. Section 8. The Investigation. A city's cry for justice. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre shook Chicago to its core, leaving an indelible mark on the city's history. Public outrage reached a fever pitch, demanding justice for the slain gangsters. The city was in turmoil, with citizens calling for swift action. Even though they were criminals, their deaths exposed the dark underbelly of the city. The massacre highlighted the rampant corruption and lawlessness that plagued Chicago. Law enforcement faced immense pressure to solve the case. The eyes of the nation were on them, and failure was not an option. They launched a massive investigation, following every lead and interrogating hundreds of suspects. The police worked tirelessly, day and night, to piece together the puzzle. But the wall of silence surrounding the massacre was impenetrable. Witnesses were too scared to speak, fearing retribution from the powerful gangs. Despite their best efforts, the investigation stalled. The detectives were left frustrated and disheartened, as every lead turned into a dead end. No one was ever convicted of the massacre. The courtroom remained empty, and justice was never served for the victims. Many believe that Capone himself orchestrated the hit from his winter retreat in Florida, using his network of corrupt officials to cover his tracks. His influence was far-reaching, and his power seemingly untouchable. Section 9. The Aftermath: Shifting Sands of Power. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre marked a significant turning point in Chicago's gangland wars, forever altering the landscape of organized crime in the city. While Capone had successfully eliminated key rivals, it came at a steep price. The brutal nature of the massacre shocked the public and drew unprecedented attention to the violent underworld. The massacre sparked a public outcry against gang violence, with citizens demanding action and justice. The streets of Chicago were filled with protests and calls for reform. The federal government, previously content to turn a blind eye to Capone's activities, could no longer ignore the rising tide of public opinion. The pressure from the public forced them to take decisive action. They launched a full-scale crackdown on organized crime, targeting Capone and his empire with relentless determination. Raids, arrests, and investigations became the order of the day. Capone's empire, already weakened by internal strife and external pressure, began to crumble. The once unassailable fortress of his criminal operations was now vulnerable. His carefully constructed facade of respectability shattered. The public and the authorities saw through his veneer, exposing the true nature of his criminal activities. He was eventually convicted of tax evasion and sentenced to prison. This conviction was a significant victory for law enforcement and a symbolic end to his reign. The era of Al Capone was over, marking the end of an infamous chapter in Chicago's history. The city would never be the same again, forever changed by the shifting sands of power. Section 10. The Massacre's Legacy: A Stain on History. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre left an indelible mark on American history. It became a symbol of the lawlessness and brutality of the Prohibition era, a stark reminder of the corrosive effects of organized crime. The massacre also cemented Al Capone's notoriety. Despite his downfall, he remained a cultural icon, a complex figure whose ruthlessness and charisma continue to fascinate and horrify. Today, the site of the massacre is a quiet residential street, but the echoes of that bloody day still linger. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre serves as a chilling reminder of the dark side of the American dream. Section 11. Remembrance and Reflection: Lessons from the Past. The 1920s were a time of great change and upheaval in America, a period marked by both prosperity and profound social challenges. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre wasn't just a one-time event. It was a brutal reminder of the dark underbelly of the Roaring Twenties. It was a symptom of a larger problem: the rise of organized crime fueled by prohibition. The ban on alcohol created a lucrative black market, leading to the proliferation of speakeasies and illegal liquor trade. It showed how greed, power, and violence could corrupt even the American dream. Figures like Al Capone became infamous, embodying the era's lawlessness and the lengths to which people would go for wealth and control. Though the Roaring Twenties are long gone, the lessons of the massacre still resonate. The decade was also a time of cultural flourishing, with jazz music, flapper fashion, and new technologies transforming everyday life. It highlights the importance of law and order, the dangers of corruption, and the need for vigilance against the forces that threaten our social fabric. The efforts to combat organized crime during this period laid the groundwork for modern law enforcement practices. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre is a story about much more than gangsters and violence. It's a tale of societal transformation and the consequences of unchecked ambition. It's a story about America, a story that reflects the complexities of our nation's history and the ongoing struggle to balance freedom with responsibility. It's a reminder of our past mistakes and a call to safeguard our future. The events of the 1920s serve as a cautionary tale, urging us to learn from history to avoid repeating it. It's a story that continues to captivate, horrify, and teach us, even after all these years. The legacy of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre endures, reminding us of the enduring impact of our actions and the importance of striving for a just society.